You arrive just before sunrise, barefoot on soft sand, the kind that hides seashells like secrets and sighs under every step. The sea before you is impossibly calm, a pane of blue glass stretched to the horizon. Somewhere out there, according to rumors, mystics, and more than one over-caffeinated archaeologist, lies a city lost beneath the waves. Atlantis. It's quiet here, that sort of cinematic quiet, where the wind holds its breath, and even the birds haven't punched in yet. Your breathing slows without being told to. The sky blushes at its own beauty. You've come not to find Atlantis, but to feel it, to wander the lines between myth and memory, between what was, what could have been, and what's simply too lovely not to believe. A small warning, though. You probably won't make it through this day. Atlantis tends to have that effect. One moment, you're pondering Plato. The next, you're drooling on your pillow. But before that happens, if you're enjoying this dreamy stroll through ancient mystery, consider liking and subscribing. And if you're still awake enough to type, tell me your city and local time in the comments below. I'm always curious who else is drifting with us. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. You sit beneath a palm tree somewhere along the Mediterranean, or maybe the Caribbean, depending on which YouTuber you ask. Atlantis is, after all, a very flexible place. It's been placed just about everywhere at this point, including Antarctica. Yes, really. You open a scroll, not metaphorically, but literally. You're holding an old parchment written in neat Greek. The author, Plato, specifically his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, written around 360 BCE. These are the first and only ancient sources that mention Atlantis by name. According to Plato, Atlantis was a mighty naval empire that existed 9,000 years before his time, which would make it roughly 11,000 years ago now, give or take a few enthusiastic calendar errors. He describes an island nation larger than Libya and Asia combined, filled with concentric rings of water and land, elegant stone bridges, and, of course, an excessive number of gleaming temples. Imagine the Las Vegas of the Bronze Age, but with more ethical concerns and slightly fewer slot machines. Plato claims that Atlantis was ultimately punished by the gods for its arrogance. The whole place supposedly sank in a single day and night of misfortune. Cue the dramatic thunderclap. Historians still debate whether Plato meant Atlantis as allegory, morality tale, or the ancient world's first high-concept bedtime story. Some insist he was referring to a real city. Others roll their eyes so hard you can hear it in their footnotes. You close the scroll and gaze out toward the sea. The water hasn't moved. It's unnervingly still. Nearby, a weathered fisherman squints toward the horizon and mutters, "The sea knows what it's hiding." You nod as if that clears things up. Farther down the shore, someone's building a sandcastle with uncanny accuracy. It has towers and moats and oddly specific proportions. A small placard next to it reads, "Reconstruction of Atlantis, ringed canal version, based on Plato's Critias." You consider asking the sculptor if they take requests, maybe a hall of records, something with a mysterious library feel. The sea begins to hum, Or maybe it's just your imagination. Either way, your eyelids grow heavy. Atlantis is out there, or in here, or nowhere at all. But isn't that the point? You drift inland now to a place even more elusive than the city under the sea. The sands shift beneath you, and somehow you're not at the shore anymore. You're walking across warm stone tiles inside a long forgotten temple. It smells of old papyrus and desert wind. Someone's been burning frankincense, probably for ambience. This is the Hall of Records, or rather, a version of it, a myth within a myth, an alleged archive buried deep beneath the Sphinx in Giza, said to contain the wisdom of a lost civilization. Not Egyptian, exactly, something older, something Atlantean. At least, that's what some believe. The walls around you are covered in strange markings, not quite hieroglyphics, not quite anything. They shimmer faintly, like they know you're not supposed to be here. Somewhere behind one of these walls, the story goes, are vaults of information, records left by Atlantean refugees after their city fell into the sea. One of them, according to lore, was named Thoth. Sound familiar? That's because Egyptian mythology adopted him as the ibis-headed god of wisdom and writing. Coincidence? Perhaps. Or perhaps history is just really good at recycling characters. You hear soft footsteps behind you, just the echo of your own. The idea of the Hall of Records took off in the 20th century, thanks in part to Edgar Cayce, an American mystic who claimed to channel visions from past lives. He believed that survivors of Atlantis had stored their knowledge beneath the Sphinx, and that this knowledge would one day be rediscovered when humanity was ready. Which is spiritual speak for, not yet, but trust me, historians remain unconvinced. No evidence has been found beneath the Sphinx, no hidden chambers, no gold-plated USB drives of ancient wisdom. But then again, absence of proof isn't proof of absence, just an archaeologist's way of saying maybe come back with better tools. Still, you look down, the floor is warm, solid, and yet something pulses beneath it, faint, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. A cat wanders into the hallway. It looks at you the way all cats look at everyone, with mild suspicion and secret superiority. Then it vanishes into a crack in the wall, as if cats have always known where the real archives are hidden. You trail your hand along the stone. A glyph shaped like a wave seems to glow for half a second, but it's probably just the lighting. Probably. Nearby, a carved inscription reads, "To know the past is to know yourself. To seek only answers is to miss the question." Poetic and also frustrating. You were hoping for at least a map. Instead, the temple gives you silence, the kind that wraps around your shoulders like a heavy velvet cloak, not oppressive, just firm, like the quiet that lives inside ancient places, the kind of quiet that says, you're not the first to ask, and you won't be the last. You hear distant water, not crashing, flowing, as though a river runs beneath this chamber. Or maybe that's just sleep coming on. After all, you've been walking a long time, across sand and scrolls, myth and memory. You sit on a low bench, carved centuries ago, and smoothed by time and curiosity. Your head tilts back, the glyphs begin to blur, the hall breathes, and you drift, not down, but inward. When you next open your eyes, you're on a boat, but not a modern one. There are no engines here, no GPS, no loudspeakers announcing lunch specials, just creaking wood, rough sails, and the smell of salt baked into everything. You're aboard a Phoenician vessel, long, narrow, and aged like a story that's been told too many times to be fully trusted. The crew barely notices you. They move with the kind of sleepy efficiency that only comes from sailing too many sunrises in a row. One of them offers you dried dates from a pouch. Another gestures at the horizon as if to say, there's something out there. Maybe. You nod, because maybe is good enough for tonight. The Phoenicians were master seafarers of the ancient Mediterranean. Long before Rome learned to row in rhythm, these people were navigating the coastlines with maps drawn more from memory than ink. From Tyre and Sidon, they spread trade and stories, purple dye and odd syllables that eventually shaped the alphabet you're reading right now. It's said, though not definitively proven, that they may have reached the Atlantic. Some even whisper that they sailed beyond the Pillars of Heracles, exploring waters few dare to name. If anyone could have found remnants of Atlantis, it would have been them. But as usual, the evidence is slippery. No Phoenician logs have been found describing a lost city of gold-rimmed canals or crystal domes. Though, to be fair, ancient sailors were more interested in cargo than cataloguing metaphors, and waterproof parchment is still a modern luxury. You drift inland now to a place even more elusive than the city under the sea. The sands shift beneath you, and somehow you're not at the shore anymore. You're walking across warm stone tiles inside a long-forgotten temple. It smells of old papyrus and desert wind. Someone's been burning frankincense, probably for ambience. This is the Hall of Records, or rather, a version of it, a myth within a myth, an alleged archive buried deep beneath the Sphinx in Giza, said to contain the wisdom of a lost civilization. Not Egyptian, exactly, something older, something Atlantean. At least, that's what some believe. The walls around you are covered in strange markings, not quite hieroglyphics, not quite anything. They shimmer faintly, like they know you're not supposed to be here. Somewhere behind one of these walls, the story goes, are vaults of information, records left by Atlantean refugees after their city fell into the sea. One of them, according to lore, was named Thoth. Sound familiar? That's because Egyptian mythology adopted him as the ibis-headed god of wisdom and writing. Coincidence? Perhaps. Or perhaps history is just really good at recycling characters. You hear soft footsteps behind you, just the echo of your own. The idea of the Hall of Records took off in the 20th century, thanks in part to Edgar Cayce, an American mystic who claimed to channel visions from past lives. He believed that survivors of Atlantis had stored their knowledge beneath the Sphinx, and that this knowledge would one day be rediscovered when humanity was ready. Which is spiritual speak for, not yet, but trust me, historians remain unconvinced. No evidence has been found beneath the Sphinx, No hidden chambers, no gold-plated USB drives of ancient wisdom. But then again, absence of proof isn't proof of absence, just an archaeologist's way of saying maybe come back with better tools. Still, you look down, the floor is warm, solid, and yet something pulses beneath it, faint, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. A cat wanders into the hallway. It looks at you the way all cats look at everyone, with mild suspicion and secret superiority. Then it vanishes into a crack in the wall, as if cats have always known where the real archives are hidden. You trail your hand along the stone. A glyph shaped like a wave seems to glow for half a second, but it's probably just the lighting. Probably. Nearby, a carved inscription reads, "To know the past is to know yourself. To seek only answers is to miss the question." Poetic and also frustrating. You were hoping for at least a map. Instead, the temple gives you silence, the kind that wraps around your shoulders like a heavy velvet cloak, not oppressive, just firm, like the quiet that lives inside ancient places, the kind of quiet that says, you're not the first to ask, and you won't be the last. You hear distant water, not crashing, flowing, as though a river runs beneath this chamber. Or maybe that's just sleep coming on. After all, you've been walking a long time, across sand and scrolls, myth and memory. You sit on a low bench, carved centuries ago, and smoothed by time and curiosity. Your head tilts back, the glyphs begin to blur, the hall breathes, and you drift, not down, but inward. The bench beneath you fades, replaced by cool grass pressed gently against your skin. You're no longer in the hidden hall. You're somewhere open now, outside, but not in any place you can name. The sky is lavender, stretched thin with dusk. Fireflies blink lazily in the tall reeds nearby, as if nature has taken a cue from bedtime routines. You hear gentle voices in the distance, scholars, dreamers, maybe both. Their robes swish like pages turning. They're debating, as scholars tend to do, with the warm frustration of people who both want to be right and be respected. The topic? Atlantis. Naturally. Not whether it existed, but where. One claims it was Santorini, the ancient Minoan civilization, swallowed by volcanic fury. Another suggests it lies beneath the seafloor off the coast of Spain, near the marshes of Doñana. A third is passionately convinced that Atlantis was Antarctica before the poles slid, which is a theory that, while creative, involves more tectonic ambition than most geologists are comfortable with. And here you are, listening to it all, with your head resting on folded arms and your eyes barely open. The Minoan connection is perhaps the most grounded of these. Around 1600 BCE, a volcanic eruption on the island of Thera, now Santorini, obliterated much of the Minoan settlement. Ash filled the skies. Tanamis raced toward Crete. Trade networks collapsed like overcooked lentils. Archaeologists often point to this disaster as the possible inspiration for Plato's Atlantis, an advanced sea-based society brought low by nature's indifference. But, and here comes the scholarly uncertainty, Plato never mentioned Thera or Crete or anything specifically Greek. He said the Atlanteans lived beyond the Pillars of Heracles, commonly understood to mean the Strait of Gibraltar, so maybe not Santorini, or maybe he was being metaphorical or geographically dramatic. Historians do love a good riddle. You turn slightly on the grass. A soft breeze ruffles your sleeve. Beside you, someone sets down a small clay tablet, freshly inscribed. The characters are sharp, but not familiar. It's more art than alphabet, swirls and dots that feel like language, but might just be doodles from a bored monk. One of the voices says, Atlantis wasn't a place, it was a warning. Another replies, or a memory passed down so many times it turned into a myth. And still another, quieter now, muses, or maybe it's real, just waiting for the right kind of dreamer. You hum without meaning to, a slow, thoughtful sound. Then someone hands you a fig, plump and perfectly ripe. Without asking, you take a bite. It's sweet, a little sticky, entirely real, even in the middle of a myth. When you next open your eyes, you're on a boat, but not a modern one. There are no engines here, no GPS, no loudspeakers announcing lunch specials, just creaking wood, rough sails, and the smell of salt baked into everything. You're aboard a Phoenician vessel, long, narrow, and aged like a story that's been told too many times to be fully trusted. The crew barely notices you. They move with the kind of sleepy efficiency that only comes from sailing too many sunrises in a row. One of them offers you dried dates from a pouch. Another gestures at the horizon as if to say, there's something out there. Maybe. You nod, because maybe is good enough for tonight. The Phoenicians were master seafarers of the ancient Mediterranean. Long before Rome learned to row in rhythm, these people were navigating the coastlines with maps drawn more from memory than ink. From Tyre and Sidon, they spread trade and stories, purple dye and odd syllables that eventually shaped the alphabet you're reading right now. It's said, though not definitively proven, that they may have reached the Atlantic. Some even whisper that they sailed beyond the Pillars of Heracles, exploring waters few dare to name. If anyone could have found remnants of Atlantis, it would have been them. But as usual, the evidence is slippery. No Phoenician logs have been found describing a lost city of gold-rimmed canals or crystal domes. Though, to be fair, ancient sailors were more interested in cargo than cataloguing metaphors, and waterproof parchment is still a modern luxury. You lean over the side of the boat, watching seaweed sway below. For a moment, you imagine stone columns beneath the waves, statues eroded smooth, a marble temple just visible in the blue. But then it's gone, just shadows and sea. The captain walks past, muttering something in a language you don't speak but somehow understand, something about deep places and gold songs. He points to the stars above, bright, indifferent, always watching. They know where it is, he says. You want to ask if he means Atlantis, or the Hall of Records, or the story that links them, but instead you just lie back on a coil of rope, close your eyes, and listen to the water tapping gently against the hull. The night smells of cedar and salt. Your limbs feel heavy. You hear a girl cry, but softly, like it's already halfway to dreaming. Above, the stars shift, and below, something ancient waits, not urgently, not loudly, just waits. You wake with the kind of quiet surprise that only comes from sleeping on a boat without tipping into the sea. The morning light is soft, peach-colored, drifting over the deck like spilled tea. Around you, the Phoenician crew is stirring, stretching, murmuring, pulling knots that have names you'll never learn. You sit up slowly. The boat has docked at an island you don't recognize. It's not marked on any modern map, of course. Most places in these kinds of stories aren't. The shoreline is misty. Palms lean toward the water like they're listening for gossip. Birds with indecisive feathers, neither quite tropical nor quite seabird, flutter overhead. The sand is littered with smooth stones shaped like eyes. You don't ask why. You follow a narrow path inland, flanked by columns so weathered they barely remember what they were meant to hold up. The air smells faintly of nutmeg and something older, stone warmed by centuries. At the path's end, a circle of stones sits in a clearing, not quite a temple, not quite a ruin, just a suggestion of structure, like someone once tried to build something and then got distracted. A woman waits in the center. She's older than history and younger than time, depending on the light. She invites you to sit. No one ever says no to people like her. She tells you a tale in a voice as calm as falling sand. Long before pyramids, long before ziggurats, there was a people who knew the stars so well they barely needed words. They built crystal towers, not the shiny kind, but the resonant kind. Structures that hummed, that healed, that remembered. And when their island fell, they didn't scream, they sang. It's a lovely story, possibly nonsense, possibly not. She offers you a carved bowl of tea made from leaves that no longer grow. It tastes like rosemary and rain. Some believe the survivors of Atlantis didn't just drift aimlessly. They say they spread their knowledge across the world, seeding civilizations like gardeners with secrets. The pyramids of Egypt, the city planning of the Olmecs, the math of the Indus Valley, bits of brilliance where none should have been, if history was as linear as textbooks pretend. Of course, she says with a smile, not everyone agrees. Scholars still debate whether these connections are real or romantically coincidental. The evidence is like the tea, flavored with belief. She waves her hand, and for a moment the mist clears. You glimpse something massive beneath the island, a shimmer, a vault, and then it's gone. She says nothing else. You nod. It feels right not to ask questions. Some stories aren't told, they're remembered. You walk the island's shore again, the sea now lit with golden late afternoon sun. The waves have slowed to a near hypnotic rhythm. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2, sigh. You match your steps to them, half thinking, half dreaming. At your feet, shells crunch like distant memories. You pause at a tide pool, peering into a world that reflects the sky and hides its own galaxies. Tinny sea stars cling to rocks. A crab does its sideways strut with the confidence of someone late to an imaginary meeting. And then, unexpectedly, a shape beneath the surface, a stone disc marked with spirals. You reach in, expecting resistance, but the water gives way like velvet. The disc lifts easily, too easily. You brush away the seaweed and feel engraved lines beneath your fingers. It hums faintly, not sound, vibration, like a tuning fork waiting to sing. This, perhaps, is the other great rumor of Atlantis, that they used sound, not stone, to build, that their structures weren't just balanced, they were resonant, that everything had a frequency, including memory. You tuck the disc into your robe pocket. Don't worry, it's an imaginary robe. You're not breaking any museum laws. As you walk, another figure appears. This one, a man, seated cross-legged beside a cairn of balanced stones. He's sketching symbols into the sand. When he sees you, he grins like an old friend who's forgotten your name. He gestures to his sand designs and says, "Some believe Atlantis had no written language, only music, shapes, energy fields, a kind of geometry for the soul." You nod as if that makes perfect sense. He adds, almost apologetically, "Historians call it pseudoscience, but the stones don't seem to mind." Then he pats the cairn affectionately, as if it just told a good joke. There's a lightness to this island, a quiet willingness to believe. You sit with him for a while. He hums tunelessly. The sea answers. A breeze carries the scent of old papyrus and citrus. Somewhere behind you, the woman from the clearing sings softly. It's not a song you recognize, but it feels remembered. You lean back, the sand warms your shoulders, your breathing slows, and as the sun dips toward the sea, you realize you've stopped trying to understand. You're just listening. Dusk drapes itself across the island like a soft woven shawl. The air has cooled, but not enough to make you shiver, just enough to remind you that time is passing, slowly, slippily. Somewhere, a bird calls out once, and then gives up on the idea entirely. You're still beside the man with the cairn, though he's now begun stacking even smaller stones atop the others with intense, deliberate patience. You half expect one of them to start levitating out of sheer spiritual momentum. He glances at you sideways. Did you know some people believe Atlantis was powered by crystals? You blink, unsure whether this is a joke or a segue. He continues, voice low like a bedtime storyteller tucking in the stars. They say the Atlanteans harness something called piezoelectric energy, the idea that certain crystals, when compressed or struck, release an electric charge. Quartz, tourmaline, even humble salt. You look down at your hands. They feel the way your mind does, heavy, buzzing faintly, like you've been listening to electricity instead of history. Crystals, not just for chakra charts and jewelry booths at Renaissance fairs. According to believers, the Atlanteans embedded them in walls, in pyramids, in temples that sang when the moonlight struck them just right. Naturally, scholars remain unconvinced. The man laughs softly, as if he heard your thoughts. Of course, mainstream archaeology says there's no evidence of any ancient civilization using energy crystals, but I've never seen mainstream archaeology move a stone with a song. You glance at the cairn. One of the stones seems to be trembling, ever so slightly. Then again, it might just be your eyes, or sleep, or both. Above you, the stars emerge like shy performers. One by one, The sky deepens into indigo. You lie back again, letting the day exhale through you, and the last thing you hear before drifting deeper is the man humming a note that somehow sounds like starlight. The next part begins underwater. Don't worry, you can breathe here. This is one of those dreamlike places where the laws of nature are more like gentle suggestions. The water cradles you like a memory. You float downward, slowly, toward a structure that reveals itself piece by piece. It's enormous, circular, concentric rings of stone and sand and canals. It looks familiar, like something Plato described on a good day, or something your brain stitched together from old documentaries and childhood wonder. This, then, is Atlantis as the mind imagines it, when no one is looking. You drift through archways too tall to measure. Mosaics line the walls, vivid, moving, as if the tiles have decided static images are simply too boring. One depicts people planting stars into soil. Another shows a library so vast it spirals into the sea itself. And then you find it. A chamber, not quite a temple, not quite a lab, somewhere in between. At its center is a device, not a machine in the modern sense. There are no blinking lights, no buttons, just a large, faceted crystal floating a few inches above a carved dais. It spins slowly, patiently, waiting. Your fingers tingle as you approach it. The water hums. Then, without touching it, you hear a voice, not from outside, from somewhere within. It says nothing specific, just waves of thought, feelings, a memory of warmth, of cities bathed in golden light, of people who did not fear their own imagination. Some say Atlantis was destroyed not by the gods, but by its own ambition, that its people reached too far into science, spirit, power, and lost their balance, like a tightrope walker who forgot they were above a canyon. Historians, understandably, don't write it that way, but you don't need a footnote for what you feel here. The chamber thrums, the crystal glows, then dims. You understand now that this isn't the past. It's a message, not of warning, but of remembering. You place a hand on your heart because that's where this kind of knowledge belongs. And slowly, gently, the water lifts you up again, back through the arches, through the dreaming city, toward the stars waiting above. You rise from the water without resistance, like a leaf caught in an invisible tide. There's no gasping, no dripping clothes, just a seamless return to air, like the sea politely stepped aside. You find yourself now in a cavern, the kind that belongs equally to geology and dreams. The walls glow faintly, not from torchlight, but from veins of mineral that pulse gently beneath the surface, like the rock itself has a heartbeat. Everything hums here, the air, the ground, even your thoughts. A robed figure appears from one of the corridors, tall, ageless, with a scroll in one hand and a gentle smirk that says, "I know something you don't, but I'm not here to ruin it." He speaks without sound, just gestures, soft and deliberate, like a conductor guiding an orchestra made of silence. You follow him. This is the archive. He implies not quite the hall of records you imagined, but perhaps what it became over time. Not one room, not even one place, just a series of chambers carved from memory and myth, containing, well, no one quite agrees. One room you pass seems to be made of water, suspended in motion. Inside, scenes flicker like reflections, glimpses of ancient cities, lost rituals, people speaking languages no one's ever recorded. You think you see a woman sketching constellations on the inside of a clay pot. Another room is full of sound, not music exactly, tones, vibrations, the gentle murmur of consciousness thinking aloud. The guide finally pauses before a plain stone doorway. No carvings, no locks, just space. He gestures once more. After you. You enter. Inside is a single pedestal. Upon it, a stone sphere, the size of a large orange. That's it. And yet, the room buzzes like it's full of secrets. You reach out. The sphere spins, slowly, and colors ripple across its surface. Deep blues, warm golds, a sudden blush of crimson. This, you understand, is one of the myths that scholars can't quite shake. That deep beneath this Sphinx, or somewhere like it, there is knowledge encoded not in language, but in sensation. Objects that remember, relics that resonate. Theories abound. Equated DNA, crystal-based memory, psychic imprints. You've read them or dreamed them. At this point, the difference feels irrelevant. The guide speaks now, finally, and only one line. To remember Atlantis is to remember yourself. You blink, the room is gone. You're not sure it ever existed. You're standing in a desert now. But the air is cool and the stars above are sharp, like pinholes in dark silk. The sand is so still, it feels intentional, like someone pressed pause on a sweeping scene. To your left, the Sphinx, and to your right, a curious excavation site. A few quiet tents, some instruments that look half scientific and half musical, and a small group of researchers speaking in murmurs as though the sand might overhear. You wander closer. One of them, a woman in a wide hat and sleep-deprived smile, nods at you as if you belong. We've scanned beneath the pores, she says, unprompted. There's something. In real life, of course, there have been ground-penetrating radar surveys of the Sphinx, particularly in the 1990s. Some detected cavities, anomalies, empty spaces where there shouldn't be. Some researchers theorized the Hall of Records lay there. Others dismissed it as natural fissures or structural settling. Scholars still debate whether there's truly anything under the Sphinx beyond rock and dreams. But tonight, the lines blur. One of the researchers hands you a tablet, not the glowing screen kind, the old kind. Clay, warm to the touch, covered in tiny indentations. It's not cuneiform, he says, but it's saying something. We just don't have the ears for it. He laughs softly. You ever notice how ancient mysteries sound a lot like lullabies? You do now. The wind picks up, brushing the sand in soft waves. One of the tents flutters open, revealing books, notes, sketches of symbols that feel oddly familiar. Circles within circles, spirals, star maps aligned with no modern constellation. Another researcher, barely awake, mumbles, maybe the hall isn't under the Sphinx. Maybe the Sphinx is just the comma in a much longer sentence. You sit down in the sand. That line, whatever it meant, has folded itself into your thoughts like a blanket, and the desert, full of stars and forgotten languages, begins to hum you to sleep again. Morning in the desert is a quiet compromise. Sunlight that doesn't shout, air that's cool without apology. You open your eyes beneath a canopy of thin linen stretched between tent poles, the kind of setup that whispers temporary, even in its elegance. You sit up slowly, sense sifts from your shoulders like a memory being shrugged off. Around you, the small excavation site is waking up. A kettle whistles faintly over a campfire, and a yawning researcher makes notes with a stick in the sand. No one's in a hurry. History, after all, isn't going anywhere. You find yourself drawn to a small, open crate, one of the ones tucked in the back of the main tent, half buried in dust and labeled only with a symbol, 3 waves under a crescent moon. Inside, you find scrolls, not papyrus, not parchment, something else, thin, almost translucent. You hold one up to the light and see. No writing, only impressions, geometric, spirals and patterns like fingerprints, dreaming of math. You ask the nearest archaeologist what they are. He shrugs. No one really knows. They're not from here. They were found in Bolivia. Actually, but sometimes things like to travel. He offers you a cup of tea that tastes like anise and twilight. This is another myth that clues to Atlantis, and perhaps the Hall of Records are scattered not in one place, but all over the globe, not in obvious ruins, but in recurring patterns, sacred geometries in Egyptian tombs, Mayan temples, Hindu mandalas, symbols that echo like familiar songs across centuries and continents. You think of the stone disc you held earlier, the sound chamber, the water-etched city, all those spirals. Maybe they weren't building to impress, the archaeologist says softly. Maybe they were building to remember. You look out over the sand, toward the Sphinx still watching the horizon. You can't tell if it's smiling or just tired. And then you hear it again, faint, rhythmic, a pulse beneath the ground. You place your hand to the earth. It's warm, alive, almost. Or maybe it's just you. By the time you leave the desert, the sun is high but forgiving. You travel by camel, though the beast seems only half invested in the endeavor. Its name is reportedly Nigel. You don't ask. The dunes pass like slow waves, rolling, quiet, ancient. Occasionally, you spot the bones of buildings swallowed by sand, a doorway with no walls, a staircase that leads nowhere, a single pillar standing like a question mark. You dismount near an oasis marked only by a few lazy palms and the softer sound of running water. There's a man there, kneeling at the edge, arranging flat stones into a spiral. His skin is sun-browned, his robe a faded indigo, and his eyes carry the kind of peace that can't be taught. He speaks without looking up. There's a story, he says, that Atlantis still exists, but not in space, in time. You settle beside him, too sleepy to argue. He continues. They say it exists just one layer beneath ours, like a radio signal you're not tuned to, Sometimes certain places ring with it, certain dreams, certain people. He places the final stone in his spiral and sits back, satisfied. The Hall of Records isn't a room, he adds. It's a frequency. You look out over the shimmering pool, the mirrored sky in its surface, the reflected palms waving upside down. According to some fringe theories, though they'd rather be called alternative histories, the knowledge of Atlantis was preserved not through stone, but through vibration, sacred sound, tones that unlock memory in the body itself. The Sphinx, the pyramids, even Stonehenge, all tuning devices waiting for someone who knows the melody. Of course, mainstream scholars tend to frown at this idea the way camels frown at effort. The man next to you hums softly, and a dragonfly hovers above the water as if listening. You close your eyes. You try to hum too, and for a moment, just the briefest moment, you feel like you've joined a chorus older than time. You awaken beneath the stars again, though you don't remember falling asleep. The fire nearby has burned low, reduced to a circle of whispering embers. The man from the oasis is gone, and so is the spiral of stones, except for one sitting quietly in your palm. It's warm. You rise, not because you need to, but because the desert calls softly, not like an alarm clock, but like a friend who wants to show you something before dawn. You walk. The sand is cooler now, almost silky underfoot. As you crest a gentle ridge, the dunes open like a curtain, revealing an ancient structure mostly buried in time. A circle of low walls, a few standing columns, and in the center, a depression that looks far too symmetrical to be natural. Another spiral, only this one is massive. A woman is there, sketching the pattern in a notebook lit by moonlight. She doesn't look surprised to see you. This design's been found everywhere, she murmurs. Egypt, Malta, Peru, Turkey, even underwater near Japan. She flips her notebook towards you, spiral after spiral, always the same core proportions, not identical, but related, as though someone across thousands of miles and thousands of years was whispering the same design into different ears. It's not just decorative, she adds. These were functional. Some believe they resonate with natural energy lines in the earth. Others say they were memory circuits. You raise an eyebrow, she laughs. A quiet, tired sound. I know, it sounds ridiculous, but it doesn't. Really, not here. She points to a corner of the ruin. See those channels? Water used to run through them. This whole place was designed for flow of energy, of emotion, maybe even sound. Theories like this belong to the realm of sacred geometry and earth energy dowsers. Scholars call it pseudoscience, but they've also never tried meditating inside a spiral at forearm with a head full of ancient myths. You sit at the center. The wind circles gently. The stars blink, and somewhere within you, something begins to hum again, low, soft, and familiar, like a forgotten song returning in pieces. Now somehow, you're in a library, but not one of marble or dust or silence. This place breathes. Its walls are made of woven reeds and soft stone, and its shelves ripple like waves. There are no books, at least not in the traditional sense. Instead, there are spheres, feathers, pieces of bark, small bowls filled with colored sands. Symbols hang in the air like floating notes. This, perhaps, is the Hall of Records, or at least one possible version of it. A woman approaches, wearing a robe the color of candlelight. She nods politely, then selects a bowl from a shelf and pours a bit of sand into your hand. The grains are warm. You feel something between your ribs loosen. This, she says gently, is how they recorded memories, not facts, feelings, states of mind. She walks with you through the aisles. Every civilization leaves behind its story, but Atlantis, they left intentions. Kafrink Keen sings, they didn't want you to remember the details. They wanted you to remember how it felt to be whole. You pass a crystal that hums as you approach, a piece of clay that smells faintly of rain, a reed flute that seems to play itself if you breathe too close. The hall isn't under the Sphinx, she says. It's not in one place. She gestures to the room. It's here, wherever you remember. You pause by a basin filled with water. Your reflection ripples, but it's not quite your face. Older, softer, wiser. Some scholars say Atlantis is just a myth. The woman muses, a metaphor for human ego, an inevitable collapse. But metaphors don't hum like this, do they? You shake your head, even if you're not entirely sure what you're agreeing with. She smiles. Then maybe it's time to stop trying to prove and start trying to feel. And just like that, the library dims, not gone, just tucked away, like all good dreams. It's raining now, not a dramatic storm, not a downpour, just a gentle, persistent rain that falls like a memory, soft, slow, a little nostalgic. You stand beneath the edge of a tree, shaped like a spiral, its leaves silver in the moonlight. They shimmer when the droplets strike them, as though the tree is remembering music. The air smells like whetstone and jasmine. You're no longer in a specific place, not the desert, not the island, not the underwater city, or the dream library. You're somewhere in between now, in the soft borderlands of consciousness. The in-between where myths live when no one's watching. Ahead, a wide stone path curls like a question mark into mist. You follow. The ground beneath your feet is familiar. You recognize the echo of old steps, your own, perhaps. You pass the fisherman who once told you the sea knows what it hides. He's asleep in a hammock made of net and stars. You pass the cat from the hall, curled up beside a clay tablet. Its tail flicks once, still judging. You pass the humming man with the cairns. His spiral of stones now circles a small fire that burns without wood. They all seem at peace now, and then you reach the end of the path, or maybe the beginning. A circle of pillars surrounds a still pool. In the center floats the stone disc, the same one from before, now glowing faintly with soft gold light. Above it, a ring of constellations spins lazily, as if waiting for someone to notice. You sit. The disc pulses once, twice, and then the mist folds in, and the stars dim, and your breath begins to slow. The world quiets. The sky above you is velvet dark, stitched with stars that blink slowly, like the final thoughts before sleep. You lie back on a bed of moss that smells faintly of lavender and old parchment. The earth beneath you exhales, or maybe you do. The distinction fades. Above, clouds drift like scrolls across the night. One looks like a temple, another like a seashell. One reminds you of a sound you almost remember. Maybe the flute in the archive, maybe the song from the oasis. It doesn't matter. You're not here to understand. You're here to be. Your body softens, releasing each muscle like a note set free. Your arms grow warm and weightless. Your thoughts become gentler, rounder, fuller. You feel the spiral within you unwinding slowly with care. The myths of Atlantis, of the Hall of Records, they were never about facts, never about stone ruins or radar scans or proving anything to anyone. They were always about wonder, about listening, about remembering something your bones already knew. And so you drift, like a boat across still water, like a memory returning home, like a story being told again in a different voice. No need to hold on now. You've already arrived. The world fades to quiet. The spiral completes, and sleep welcomes you in.